My name is Mike Shepard. I'm a producer. I want to get to know the artists in my new community. This is 1,000 Meals with 1,000 Artists.
How did you get here and where did you come from? Tell me where you've been and where you're going.
Hi, I'm Kevin Laporte. I'm a video producer and video director, and I would say my art form is primarily video, but I do have a background in theater production.
This week, I had the pleasure of finally sitting down with Kevin Laporte. I say finally because seemed like over a month, maybe even more, for Kevin and I to finally get down to having a meal. It wasn't his fault. My schedule kept changing and things got really busy over the break. And of course, as we know, 1,000 Meals took a bit of a break. So finally, I was able to connect with Kevin. I've been waiting to chat with him for really a lot of reasons. The person who connected me with was Andrew Brannon, who did one of the 1,000 Meals a couple of weeks ago. Kevin is someone who worked with him on some film projects. Kevin was in the film that I saw. He's done a lot of production side. And what was really fascinating was he was at Queen's University like a year, maybe 2 years after I finished at Queen's. He did the stage and screen program, so a lot of film and theater mix. So I was really, one, interested to connect with someone in Ottawa who had a similar background to me, who created theater in Kingston at Queen's University, who, he shared a lot of his experience of jumping from show to show to show, it being completely common to do 4 to 5 shows a year. And I just was really happy to be able to connect with someone who had that experience like I did from Queens and kind of get a perspective from someone of the kind of next generation going through the drama department. So it was really nice to connect with Kevin. Unfortunately, this episode, something happened with our microphones. This was the first time that I've ever had issues with these small wireless microphones that I use. I lost a part of our conversation. Obviously, as you'll hear, I was still able to salvage a full episode. There were just some things that we talked about that I wish we could have expanded on a bit further. One of the things that I thought really stuck out with this conversation was that comparable from the theater world and theater community to the film world and film community, which I find really interesting. This is a year that myself and Soul One Productions are getting really involved in film on a presentation side. This is something that I've never really done too much. Obviously in my history of doing theater and performing arts festivals, film was a part of that. But it's really interesting to be diving into almost a new world. And some of the questions we asked that I don't think we got too much detail on in this podcast was just talking about how theater companies form all the time, yet for some reason with film companies, it doesn't seem to be the same, even though the venues are there. We have just as many film venues as we do theater venues. The production process is similar. The time commitment is similar. So I think that there's some interesting questions to ask there that maybe I will find an answer to as I continue to connect with filmmakers, which clearly there's a lot of people here in Ottawa interested in film. So I'm really excited to continue to connect there, as well as on the theater side. I'm hopefully in the next couple of meals, I'm going to finally meet some more members of the theater community, which both Kevin and I both admit we don't know that much about the theater community here in Ottawa. He's done much more on the film production side than the theater side since arriving here. So he definitely has some good insights into the film production and kind of what draws him to that platform. Kevin and I met at a really lovely pizza place. This place, I don't know what to say about it other than I've been a pretty big critic of, I should say, of pizza in various places. I happen to think that there's not a lot of really good pizza places anywhere, and this was an exception. I think I've had the best pizza that I've had since arriving in Ottawa, the best pizza that I can even name other than this one place in Gananoque that I really love. So it's Louis or Luis, I think it's Louis Pizza on MacArthur Street in Ottawa. So Louis Pizzeria and Restaurant, we shared a medium Hawaiian pizza. It was a really great conversation over really great food. It's a favorite of his. He says without a doubt the pizza is the best in this place. So if you're going to try it out, go try their pizza. Best pizza I've had in Ottawa. So Kevin and I started our conversations off by chatting a bit about our experience at Queen's University. So we start by reminiscing there. And again, I do apologize if some things seem a little choppy. I did have to work around some issues with the microphones, but hopefully we'll have that repaired for next time. I hope you enjoy the conversation between myself and Kevin Laporte.
But like the Queen's film department, at least in between 2013 and 2017, it was transitioning, and they were trying to offer more like production, like hard skills, hard classes. It's all theory.
Yeah.
Whereas theater, and I think as you know, is very, very, very different, very hands-on.
Yeah.
A lot of opportunities to be working on shows.
Yeah, it's very true.
On set.
Yeah.
And I was just doing a lot more, and there was always more opportunities. So, as everyone does at Queen's, like 3 or 4 shows, a season, you're working on different things. So I learned a lot of experience there. But then when I moved to Ottawa, for some reason, just the first thing that was really available was a video production job, and I jumped right into that. So
that's very cool. Yeah, that's and you're right about Queen, because as you know, I went to Queen's too. I did the theater department stuff, and that's really the biggest thing I would say that was an advantage for that department was the opportunities, because, and it wasn't even really, it was more created of the atmosphere, because the drama department does their 2 shows a year, but then everyone has a theater company.
yeah,
so
exactly.
There's no, like, starting a theater company at Queen's was just sort of the thing you did.
Yeah,
it wasn't difficult or strange or looked at as like, wow, that's impressive. No, everyone has one. Everyone has a theater company, so therefore there are anywhere from 8 to 10 shows a year.
Yep.
So you can do 2 or 3 in a year and be completely fine.
Yeah.
So that was definitely an advantage. And then what? So in there though, like obviously you did stage and screen, but where'd you develop the physical skills? Because I would describe theater, to me at least, as kind of you can fly by with some technical knowledge, but for the most part, there's lots of positions where you don't have to know.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'd say I developed a lot of film skills by playing as a kid, and just by like being given opportunities to submit school projects in a video format. Yeah. I was. It was great because like just more and more throughout my high school, in like grade 9, there was always just like assignments written versus or like oral presentation. Like those were the 2 options.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they started introducing like you can make a video, you can do they were like the sort of submission requirements were a lot more broadened.
Interesting. I never had that.
Fair.
Those opportunities to just do this, but you can do it in your own format.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That's really
exactly.
cool.
And I latched on to it. And I remember like editing like every second I had for I think it was like an English assignment. I made a video for it, and like pulled an all-nighter, making sure it was perfect. And I was spending like obsessive amount of time working on this project and making sure it was perfect. And I was so proud to show it. And then I remember having a realization that whenever I do written assignments, I just kind of like write it and then I submit it. And I don't care if there's any mistakes. I don't care if I'm just like, it's over with. I can look for something else. And I sort of realized that, well, some people actually like, they edit their writing as meticulously as I would be editing a video, or they spend as much time and attention to detail in their writing as they do to, making sure that, their arguments and points are correct.
Yeah.
And to me, that was like a big sign. That was like, okay, this is something that you enjoy. This is something that you're really interested in. And
Especially doing it unprompted.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And because it's also new too, right? Like,
Yeah.
not everyone's doing it. Not everyone's able to. It's also like any sort of art takes a bit of confidence and a bit of like a leap of faith by putting yourself out there and putting something out there. Unless it's an oral presentation, you're not like reading it out to the front of the class.
No, and that's the thing. It's very very different. If you get up and present, then yes, you start to get into like presentation skills is like that's an art form. There's things within that. But I think there's a certain levelness to handing in an essay, and that again that also comes from someone who's not a long form writer.
Yeah.
If I'm told to write an essay, eyes just roll, and it's never been me. I've never been academically driven in that way. What has always driven me is more those hands-on things and creating stuff, which is really interesting. And yeah, it's so fascinating that you're sort of self-taught in a way. And
so that's the beginnings. I can't discredit everything I learned at Queen's.
Oh no, of course.
And I actually do want to say a lot of the hard skills I think I probably learned just through the drama department. Like the way you compose yourself on a set and collaborate with other creatives for a stage performance is quite similar to the way you'd want to sort of compose yourself on whether it be a corporate film, television set, or or film set.
Yeah.
So I think that's like when you ask like where did I learn those hard skills? Yeah. It was there was like 2 production courses that you have to like equivalent to like co-op courses where you have to get your hours, but for the most part it was the evenings and weekends outside of my degree working on shows.
Working on theater shows. Yeah. But I guess my question around that is, so what did you do on theater shows? Like were you...
Yeah, I did a bit of everything.
Okay, everything.
Yeah.
Describe that for people who aren't you and me who like understand what everything is.
Yeah, of course.
What did you do?
Of course. So I approached every different creative and technical role or opportunity that was available with the idea that the end goal was always to become a better director. Somebody who understood how the pieces fit together, and also what it really took, and what were the responsibilities, and what were maybe the limitations, or like how difficult something really was, so that you don't want just a director that's naive about what it takes to be a lighting technician, and how are you going to set up lights. So that's actually
really good point.
Yeah, that's the one element that I actually didn't really dive too much into because it was the barrier for entry was a little bit higher than the rest.
Yeah.
But like sound designing was one of the first things that I tried, and then that ultimately became. I thought I was just going to be a sound operator.
Yeah.
And the producers were like, "Oh no, we'd love to hire you as like the sound designer and for these shows, and like we need you to make the background, make the score, come up with everything." I did set carpentry and set design as well. So I started with set design.
Yeah.
My as a hobby, I do also like to do woodwork, create things. So I am comfortable with the woodworking tools. And when that came to light, again, there's so many shows. People are looking for anybody they can get. I'm saying anybody because I wouldn't consider myself a carpenter. Right. But they're like, oh, so you've already designed sets and you like to work with your hands. We need you to be, and you've done 1 year as like I'm blanking on like it's not set carpentry, but like it was for QMT. I helped QMT do one of their stage builds for one of the shows.
Yeah, you were on the build team for that.
Yeah, I was on the build team. They're like, oh, so you've done the build team as well? Well, we need you to manage this year's build team. So
we need you to get upgraded really quickly.
Yeah, exactly. So that was like fell into that role pretty quick. I actually I did do a major. I did costume. That was the other one that I was trying to think of earlier. I did costume and wardrobe for a winter major. I find it really cool that you've created so many theater companies because stepping away from being full-time employed and trying to make more projects, self-fund projects.
Yeah.
And also even just like teetering on, I left a corporate production company and I was able to be creative in my 9 to 5 but I don't want to become a freelancer to then be like 50% business person, mogul, and you're like all your time is spent, you know, chasing the next project, setting yourself up so that you can be creative.
Yeah.
A lot of friends that I know who do a business startup, they always say the same thing. They say, I started this business because I wanted to do what I enjoy doing, but I ended up becoming business manager
And not doing the thing you enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, it's very true.
But I see more and more in a creative, and now I'm speaking specifically for video production in this creative industry. It must be very hard for companies to really grow and scale, because your talent at a certain point just asks themselves, like, can I just do this on my own?
Yeah.
And I've definitely always told myself I don't want to do that. I don't envy people who have to, who are running their self business and they're grinding for clients. So I always find myself super fortunate when I can find a production company or find a company that like has the work for you and they're like, here, be creative.
Yeah.
But ultimately, as an artist, you're sort of being your talent's being exploited, because at the end of the day, you could maybe find a network of clients and just have them pay you directly. So there's definitely a fine balance, and there's definitely shifting dynamics. I guess I'm also maybe just in a period where I'm a bit lost in what I actually want to do, in terms of, do I want to just like allow my works and my skill sets to be used for a gain for someone else, or do I want to work that little bit harder and just put myself out there? But then again, like, when I think about it, it's a little bit scary, and it just doesn't interest me, having to like worry about that every single day and every single night.
Listen to that instinct, because no matter what you do, like, the one thing that I've learned is if you can't defeat the reasons not to do something, then it's not worth doing.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a million reasons not to do something. So I always try to focus on, well, what's the reasons why I should do it?
Yeah.
And then when it comes to that, how excited does that make you? But if it doesn't make you that excited, then that tells you something. And client-based work's tough. Like, client-based work, you're right, it's such a grind, it's so tough. So I think that, like, yeah, you have to listen to that instinct, but I don't think there's anything wrong with being at a bit of a crossroads, though, and not being 100% sure where you're going. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's okay to take that time, figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, by guessing of the time you went to university and time I went through, I might be 10 years older than you. And there's still elements of what you're saying that resonate for me, but not in a negative way.
Yeah.
In a way of like, I've been doing that too, but there's, certain paths I now know that I don't want to go down.
Yeah.
Which is as valuable, the ones you do, because knowing what you don't want to do helps you stay away from some of that pain.
I don't know what I can say or not say, but I love the expression, fuck around and find out. I'm sure you can censor this if you need to, or I don't know how.
I don't know, actually. I'm really you're the first person to swear on it. So
I
don't know.
It's a great
Maybe
it's a great
it'll stay
mentality. Yeah. It's it's not being said in a crude way. So, I try to lead my life by a certain philosophy of there's only so many minutes in a day. There's only so many, and that expands to the greater idea of like you only have so many minutes in your lifetime. But there's only so many minutes in a day. Don't let there only be so many moments in your lifetime.
Yeah.
So you can't control how much time you have in a day, but you can control how many theater companies you decide to create. You can control how many shows you say yes to, how many experiences you try. And so, that's why I think I'll always be changing, and I'll always be, but that's maybe a good thing, because I've always been advised by professors, but also just I want to say really wise people that I met. They weren't necessarily professors because they didn't teach me. That's a great word. Mentors that to be truly creative, you have to live a lot of experiences, and you have to understand what life is, to then try to try to interpret it and try to create experiences for other people. Yeah, so like that's kind of my solace when I'm just like doing something that isn't, quote unquote productive or isn't working on a show, like gardening, for example, or hanging out with friends and like playing a board game.
Yeah.
It's still living an experience that you can then use as an artist.
Yeah.
So, or traveling as well. It's another big one. I'm
Traveling
always like,
is a good one.
do I want to travel, or is that just like a huge waste of money? But more and more, I'm realizing that traveling is like the best thing I think anybody can do to just experience, a life and then be able to share about it. So
I think there's nothing wrong with being adaptable, because that's to me, when listening to you kind of talk about these things and all the things you've done and like how you come about it, you just seem like someone who adapts, adapting to situations, which isn't a bad thing. Like that just might be a core skill you have or have developed, your ability to adapt and change and grow. And there was something you said about like, well, maybe I'll always be changing, and that's not a bad thing. I actually think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like that's probably a healthier way to kind of live, to be adaptable and to be able to change, to be able to roll with the punches, because there's a lot in life you can't control.
Are you adapting right now? Like, you find your like, how have you been adapting to Ottawa, and how has that been going? Like, are your production companies still operating in Kingston? That's another big question that I have.
Yeah, everything. They all exist still. Okay. Yeah. I left Blue Canoe at the end of 2018, like the fall, end of the summer season in 2018.
Okay.
And it's still running today, and the Juvenus Festival is still running, and the Kick Me Push Festival, which I co-founded, is still running. Yeah, am I adapting to Ottawa? I don't know. I would say that I wasted my first year in Ottawa being so busy. Because I had a new job that I was kind of adjusting to. I was in a new place. I didn't really know anybody, and I really like siloed. And then this past year has been the opposite. I've had more time. I'm busy now because I took on a new project. But this past year, 2023, I experienced Ottawa for the first time, so I feel like I got a better sense of it. I don't know if I'm adapting to Ottawa, or if Ottawa is starting to adapt to me.
Oh, okay.
Because so far in the projects I've engaged with, like to frame it in arts, the projects I've engaged with, the people I've worked with, I feel like I've brought a lot of my experience to framing how those work.
Okay.
And it is not a new thing. That doesn't feel, it feels like I'm like, oh yeah, this again.
I'm not connected with the theater production scene in Ottawa. And I never really decided to. Maybe it was because of just being burnt out and not having felt like I earned any value from working on hundreds of shows. I wouldn't say hundreds, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but
right.
Right, like show after show after show after show, working on something, never really finding any value there. And maybe I'm like unveiling a piece of myself that I have to deal with it. Like, yeah, maybe I'm at a point where I feel like I need to be doing something for money.
It's understandable.
But I don't think that's I don't think anybody can blame me for
not
that.
at all.
Yeah, it's people gotta eat this delicious pizza.
Yeah, like that's the thing. If we didn't have our jobs, we couldn't have this delicious pizza.
I feel like there's also like different tiers and different levels of production that I'm discovering this year in Ottawa, that like there will always be the small artists who are either up and coming or have never really just figured out how to develop a team, make a team. And then there's the artists that collaborate together, and obviously you can see when more people are involved, more creative talent is involved, starts to get better. I think there's a fine line in this grouping where there's everyone who's getting together for free, and it's a bit tense because it's like, how much can everybody put in their time for free, and how many people are willing, and there's a high turnover of teams changing because everybody is helping each other out, but then there's not like one team that's consistently working together. I have yet to find a team.
That's interesting. Yeah,
maybe there are, and they're just like they're tight knit.
But you haven't found it yet.
Haven't found it yet.
Which isn't it? That's a thing.
Well, I have to say, me and I think you obviously know Andrew because he introduced us.
Yeah.
Him and we work together, but that's because we actually worked together in our day jobs. So everybody likes to work with who they know. And then I'm sure there's like, then we start to get into the funded teams where it's, whether they're funded through grants or they're funded through investors or they already have income from maybe past projects or they've found distributors and are able to distribute their work. To me, I've still only really connected and networked in the first two groups. I've yet to really, and I wonder if this latter group are just the production houses of Ottawa, right? The larger television production studios, the film production studios that exist. It's my journey is still very early on in meeting people, and ultimately trying to just kind of showcase the skills and talent that I've learned over the last few years as a director, and saying yes to everybody and wanting to help out with everyone's work, because I actually found out why I do. Maybe not find out. I think I'm getting closer to understanding why I find it easier to help on other people's projects than it is for me to write a script and make something, or produce a film and make something, is because it's so much scarier when it's your own work, right? But when you can bring your talent and you can bring your expertise and
help someone else,
and be exactly, help someone else, and just then be completely thankful, and just that's very easy.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, when it's on you, or when it's your project, that can be a lot scarier.
Yes.
So if there's any artists that end up listening to this, that's something that I'm sort of coming to grips with this year, because of that period of having so much time. I'm just trying to get connected, trying to say yes, and it's very easy to say yes. Very hard to ask people, "Do you want to work on this thing? Please come help me work on this thing. Please trust me that this thing is worth your time."
Yes.
And then having to
Yes.
put that out, right? So
it's a risk. It's a big risk. Again, as we've talked about, I come from that perspective of being that person for such a long time. Ran a theater company, was always directing stuff, always bringing in other people. It got easier over time, but that feeling never really went away. There was always that sense of, I'm asking a lot of others, and I think one of the things I've grown and changed in a bit, in a good way, is I think I appreciate others' times more, and appreciate that coming in and helping out is kind of a thing. I think that what I'd be really interested to hear from you is what does come next? What does the next little bit look like for you? What projects are you working on? And where do you just kind of perceive or see things going?
Yeah. Where I see things going within a year, I'm actually planning an extended move to Argentina. So in the fall of this year, it's been a year in discussion. The last few months, my girlfriend and I have taken actual immediate steps to make it happen.
Yeah.
Her taking a self-funded leave from her work, and that intention is for three things. I've done a lot of traveling. I pride myself on having traveled a lot, but I've never lived outside of Ontario. And I've always I was inspired by it was actually her brother who moved to Paris, and they lived in Paris, immersed themselves in Paris, and just experienced the city by living there. I'm teaching myself Spanish, and I feel like the last step in that language learning is immersion, total immersion.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to live I wanted to live outside of Ontario, Spanish-speaking country.
Yeah.
Never been to South America. It's time to actually go and live somewhere in South America. So
very cool. That's gonna be quite the journey.
Yeah. So that's the personal growth there. Hoping to experience productions in South America. Be really great to maybe end up on some sets that, hey, how do they do it down here?
Yeah.
And also scene scouting and location scouting, because as an artist and as a creative, knowing the landscapes that exist out in the world just kind of makes it easier to tell somebody this movie's going to be great. Have you ever seen this land? Have you ever been to this place? Yeah, that's kind of like the next year for me, how I envision it going through.
Very cool.
1,000 Meals with 1,000 Artists is a project of Soul One Arts Inc., produced and edited by me, Mike Shepard. Original music by Savannah Shea. Thank you to this week's artists and the local restaurants who host us. For more on 1,000 Meals with 1,000 Artists and Soul One, please visit soulonearts.ca. If you're an artist, feel free to reach out to us on our website and connect for your own meal. Thank you for listening.